Let's now welcome to the stage Dr. Rukmini Banerjee.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. In India, we say namaste. Louder. Okay. Now I know you're awake. We are supposed to talk about turning points. If you've been around as long as I have, I've had many turning points. But I'm going to talk only about one because we have limited time here. Go back 20 years, 2004. I remember it was September 2004. My own home state in India is called Bihar. And in 2004, it was one of the poorer states, very large numbers of children who were out of school, and not much had happened in the education, especially in the primary schools, for a long time. And then we heard that the government is going to bring on 80,000 new teachers. We had about 200,000. We are a crowded, big country, so don't be frightened by the numbers. We had about 200,000 teachers, but bringing in a new 80,000 would give a huge jump up to the whole education system. This was around the time that we had begun to develop our teaching at the right level, as you saw, which helps children who are, let's say, 7 or 8 or older, learn to read and do math quite quickly. So we were also looking for an opportunity to be able to insert some of that into a large-scale change. So when we heard about this government initiative, we got in touch with them, September 15th, and we were told that the first step in this process is going to be to train 6,000 master trainers. We wanted to know how we could help, and the government said, if you want to help, show up by the 1st of October. We will have our master trainers in 150 locations across the state, because you can't have so many people in one place. So if you have to help us, can you go to 150 locations? I took this back to some of the people that you saw on the screen. I remember one of our board members saying, this is a bit ridiculous. How are you going to carry this out? And maybe the fact that we didn't think too hard helped us. So I said, let's see if there are people who are willing. There were no cell phones in those days. So I think it was just normal phones. We called all over the country. We had Pratham teams in many places. And basically what we said is, can you do this method? Have you done it before with kids in your own neighborhood or in your own state? Number 2, can you speak Hindi? Because the state to which we were going needs Hindi. And number 3, and I'm not sure how many people listen to the number 3, do ask your parents if you can go away for a month. Where is the money? We said we'll figure that out later. So one of the reasons I put this picture up is because people got onto trains, and you can see the trains are quite crowded, used to be quite crowded in those days. People inside the train, people on top of the train, people hanging out. And lo and behold, by the 25th or 26th of September, 300 of my colleagues had arrived. All young, many female, and I think many of them hadn't really told their parents where they were going, because Bihar, my state in those days, had a reputation for being a rough place. So the first was logistics. Where do you put up 300 people? Where do you put up 300 people for a short period of time? Because we didn't have the money to house them for too long, but just enough to give them a big boost of energy before sending them off all across the state. Madhav, who's one of the co-founders, gave them 3 messages. The first one was, make friends. Very important when you try to do anything new is to make friends. Second one was, do the magic. The magic was that kids can learn quite quickly if they're a little bit older. And the third one was, give everybody the chance to participate. Give them the opportunity. So in Hindi, we would say, dosti karo. Dosti means friendship, make friends. Number 2, jadoo dikhao, show the magic. And number 3, mauka do, give an opportunity to others to participate. So far, so good? Yes? Some people are not convinced. So then, off go my people in twos all over the state. Now, master trainers, by the very name, as you can tell, largely men, largely older, all our people, largely young, almost everybody young, very young, probably early 20s, and many of them female. When they arrived in the places they were going to be in, this was residential training. So 10 days, everybody lived together. We found sometimes there was all men and just 2 girls. Older men and 2 little girls. That was fine, but more importantly, the session planning for the 10 days had been done. Because this is very serious teacher professional development. There are all kinds of theoretical things that people have to be told. So where do we insert the piece that we wanted to do? In any case, our young people would not have been able to train these older, more experienced people. So what we negotiated was, can you let 1 hour during the day, can you take all the trainees out of the classroom or the training center, go to a nearby school, and practice the method, even if it's just for 10 days. The first 1 or 2 days were very difficult because training happens in training centers. It doesn't happen with the trainees going to the classroom, particularly not the experienced people who have been teaching for years to go to the classroom. The kids, I remember, were very amused because they usually had 1 teacher, not 4 or 5 really experienced teachers coming into their classroom. But it worked. And I think it partly worked because these young people were very persuasive. And they had some magic that they wanted to share. One night, I remember, one of our girls had a problem at home in a state quite far away. And she got the message that she needs to go home because her father is not well. And so she set off, but after that, we couldn't contact her. And all night I was awake thinking, this was a bad idea. We cannot lose one young person somewhere in this big bad world. And why the hell did I come up with it? And I remember thinking that this is the point at which my blood pressure problem started. Because what will? Next morning, somebody called me and said, we heard you were worried, but why were you worried? Because she set off to go to the train station. It was late. So we kept her at home. We gave her good food, made sure she had enough food for the journey, and we've put her on the train. So all across the state, this is what we encountered. In the beginning, some skepticism, but after that, real warmth. These young kids had come from all over India, and sometimes the food in this particular village where they were training was not to their liking. We had to go to public phone booths. The trainers went to the public phone booths, called their parents, got recipes so that the cooks could make food that would make them happy. In 10 days' time, we did see a change in the children. I think all these older people, they were just so taken aback by the fact that you would come across the country, you would hold your hand, you would drag you sometimes to the school, and make you do the method that everybody began to see that even in a short period of time, you could change. So, we have very little time left. I think this turning point was very important, not just for me, but for all of us. The fact that even as little people, as common people, as ordinary people, you could have a big dream. The big dream would be that one of our most backward states could actually change. And we discovered that if you reach out and you try to make friends, you make many, many friends, many of whom, against their better judgment, actually start listening to you. So even if you are a small step in this big game, you must take it. You must be, like many of my colleagues were, brave, but I think more than brave, they were just curious. They wanted to see what other parts of the country were like. And when they went there, I think they found many, many people who were willing to join them. So out of these 300 people, it so happens, without any planning, one of them is actually in this room. Where are you? Where is... Stand up. Hey, and she didn't even know I was going to do this. And I looked last night at the names. I found the names of these 300 people. Many of them are now leaders within Pratham, or like Shobini here, they are leaders of other organizations. Small steps go a long way, and I think the more small steps we take, and we take it together, we will really be able to bring big, big changes. Thank you so much. Oh. I don't have too many pictures, but I just want to give you one more. Michelle? Oops. We practiced this, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rukmini. Please have a seat. Please join me to welcome Professor Usha.
Well, hello, good morning. We were given quite vague instructions for this session, and I've interpreted a bit differently to Rukmini, because I'm going to talk about turning points in my own progression, because everybody starts somewhere. So for me, my journey really started at school. I really loved going to school. I learned to read at primary school very quickly, and reading was fantastic. And I thought, I know what I want to do when I'm grown up. I'm going to be a primary school teacher, and I'm going to help children learn to read. And then I went to secondary school, and I was part of this big education experiment that England decided to do away with grammar schooling, with streaming children. You just had to go to your local school, and my local school had been not a selective school, it was a secondary modern school, where everybody left at 16 and nobody was really very interested in education. And so I was this child who really wanted to learn, but I was bullied for being clever. It was not seen as cool to be clever. And so me and my friends were really waiting until we got old enough to move up to the old grammar school, because we thought that then we would finally be being taught and it would all be very exciting. But that wasn't what happened at all, because when we got up to the old grammar school, we found that the teachers thought we were the wrong kind of children. So they weren't interested in developing us, because they were used to teaching high-level children who were grammar school material, and they thought we weren't grammar school material. And I remember saying that I'd like to start a debating club at school, and the teachers were like, well, what do children like you want a debating club for? It was very low aspirations for us. Nobody encouraged you to apply to Oxford, so I didn't apply to Oxford. I'd actually got a place at the University of Manchester. But then I did my A-levels, which at that time, if you had 3 A grades at A-level, that was the absolute top. And my cousin said to me, well, you could have gone to Oxford, you got 3 A's. And in those days, you had to do an entrance exam for Oxford. And every year before our year, that grammar school had trained children for this entrance exam. So I went back to school and I said, could you train me for the entrance exam? I'd like to try and go to Oxford. And the careers man said, you should just get Oxford out of your head, you know. I see you going to Manchester University and getting a nice 2-2 degree. And that was so gutting, because I thought, he knows how hard I work. At least I would have got a 2-1 degree. So I was telling my cousin this, and he said, well, there's no harm writing to a few colleges. Maybe they'll take you without the exam. And so I wrote to 3 colleges. 2 of them wrote straight back and said, sorry, goodbye. But the third college phoned me at home and said, if you can come on Friday, I'll give you an interview. And that was my first real turning point. It was Peter Bryant, who was my tutor at Oxford. And he interviewed me by just asking about some psychology experiments that I'd never heard of, but I had to try and reason out why they turned out as they did. And he said, I'll give you a place. He said, this is the first year we're taking women at this college, and I wanted to take only women, and I didn't get enough applicants, so, you know, come along. So there I was. I went to Oxford. I had no idea how I was ranked compared to the other students, because I hadn't got in the proper way. And so I was, you know, working away all my 3 years there. And at the end of the 3 years, I got the top first in my cohort. And so Peter Bryant said to me, you should stay and do a PhD. You know, if you get the top first, we have money for you. And I said, no, I want to do something practical to help children. I'm going to go and train to be a primary school teacher. So I went to do teacher training. And what I found was that there was no connection between all the exciting research about child development and reading that I learned about in my Oxford degree and what was actually happening in schools. And I thought there's a big gap here. So these 6-year-olds are really struggling to read, and I know what some of the reasons probably are, so let me go back and do a PhD. So I did do the PhD at Oxford. I was interested in reading by analogy, which is about rhyming patterns in words. And then I learned that there was someone in America who was working on analogy. She sounded really exciting, so I thought, let me try and get a scholarship to go and study with her. And that was my second turning point. Anne Brown, who was an absolutely outstanding cognitive developmental psychologist. She worked at the University of Illinois, but she was very networked into that North American scene because the other problem in Oxford was it was nearly all men. There was one female faculty, but there were no role models. And then I went to work with Anne for a year, and there were all these role models, you know, successful women who were doing a great job in their universities. So I thought, okay, well, I could try and become a university lecturer. And so when I got back to England, I applied. It was the first job that came up was at Cambridge. 29 years old, I went to Cambridge. I was given this title that doesn't exist anymore, which is University Assistant Lecturer. It was very junior. You know, 2 years later, one of my friends from Oxford was appointed. He was the same kind of criteria as me, but he was appointed at the level above me. And I thought, how can this be happening? Because we're the same. Went to the head of department, and he said, I'm sorry, you've got to wait your turn. There's another 3 men in front of you before you can hope to have any kind of promotion. So I thought, well, I can't stay in Cambridge. I'll have to move. And in fact, a job came up at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. So I moved to London for 6 years, and I moved at the professorial level. So I was promoted straight to professor. And that's where I got interested in dyslexia and in brain imaging, because I realized that the whole field was really only at the beginning. And I felt that I needed to understand more about the brain if I was going to understand why children were developing dyslexia. And again, you get to a new environment, so you think you should make friends, you know, meet colleagues. And I went to somebody presenting on their PhD, and they were doing a task basically about rhythmic speech. You had to say seat, sweet, seat, sweet to a rhythm. And they said what they were finding was that when you're deliberately timing speech, it's this energy change as you say the vowel of any syllable. So our voice will go up and down in energy when we talk, but there's always a peak that you reach with the vowel. And I thought, well, that's interesting because these children with my rhyme analogies, that's one of the things they don't really seem to get. Where is that peak, vowel peak? So I thought I could start looking at this as a non-speech specific marker of dyslexia. And we did some studies. They came out very interesting. I thought, I really need a brain imaging lab. But I had no resources, because you have to get everything on grants in the UK. You don't just get given a lab. And then out of the blue, I got a letter from Cambridge University saying that they wanted research leadership in the education faculty, and could I be interested, and if so, could I write a 5-year plan? So I wrote a 5-year plan to do neuroscience in education. And they hired me, and they gave me a brain imaging lab because that was part of my startup. And we started doing all these studies. And the great thing, of course, about Cambridge is you get students from around the world. So I had students from China or from Finland or from Spain, you know, very diverse languages. And again, we were getting the same kind of data. So I thought, right, there's something really important here. I'm onto something. But it was seen as very eccentric, what I was doing. It wasn't seen as, how could it be right? You know, so I had a lot of trouble publishing each paper. And I had to work so hard because I didn't have any resources. So I had to, every computer cable that broke, I had to get another grant so that we could keep going. And that was really my big setback, was that I woke up one day in 2012 and I couldn't move my legs. It was as though something had just been switched off in my brain and I had no energy. And the diagnosis was chronic fatigue syndrome. It's a really horrible illness that I wouldn't wish on anyone. And if you think about it, it was probably a sort of stress-related breakdown because I was just working way too hard. And that would be my last turning point, is that when I had chronic fatigue syndrome, you know, you get signed off work and you're lying in your bed thinking, will I ever get back to what I was? And by then, the centre had been moved to psychology, and so I had a head of department who'd known me since my university assistant lecturer days, And he said, listen, Usha, this is Trevor Robbins, so he was my third important turning point. He said, just take the time you need to get better. As long as you do your lectures and you're examining, I'm not going to monitor whether you're in the department every day. It will be a slow process, but I believe in you. You will get better. And it took me 6 years, but he was right. And having that trust from somebody of his caliber, so he's one of the most cited cognitive neuroscientists in the world, and just letting me get better in my own time was so important, because chronic fatigue syndrome, as soon as you're stressed, you have another relapse. It's very, very hard to get better. But I learned all about the gut microbiome, the importance of protecting your body from stresses and so on. And I am better, more or less, today, as long as I watch my energy levels. And at the same time, of course, I was getting more and more data that really supported my theory. So I think that would be my other message to young people. You don't know where you're starting from. You don't know where the end is going to come. But if you keep doing the next interesting question that your science suggests is now where you need to focus next, and keep getting data, in the end, you change the world. Because now my theory is seen as the dominant theory. It's not seen as an eccentric idea anymore that why is this, seems to be working. It's seen as really fundamental. And one of the reasons is because it turned out that that amplitude rise time measure that I was measuring is what the brain is using to reset its signaling patterns. So just like those fireflies in the forest, going with the beating drum, when you're talking to somebody, the brain is using those rise times to get its different networks in time with the beat, with all those different fast and slow waves. And that was why it was such a fundamental aspect of children's spoken language systems. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Usha. Please take a seat. Let's give a warm welcome to Angie.
Good morning, everybody. I am very loud, but I have to use this. But I grew up in the village. Good morning, everybody. So excuse me when I start going, because this technology is not something that I'm very used to. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm going to ask us to do some of the things that you're very uncomfortable to do. How many of us in this room are under 10? I mean 10 years, not decades. How many of you are under 10? Okay. How many are under 20? Please put up your hand. Okay. Please put them down. How many are between 20 and 30? Please put it up proper so I can see it. Okay. And how many are 30 to 40? Okay. And the rest of us? Well, I'm going to talk to you about 3 turning points in my life. And I'm so glad that we started by me taking you back to my roots where I grew up, to rural Africa. So, my first turning point, I was around 12, 13. I was one of those students, Usha, you were talking about. Students who are just ridiculously bright at school. So what they used to do at my school is whenever, we wrote our end of term exams, they would announce your name at school assembly. And well, I always knew that I would be like, hey, number 1, Angeline. If I was not number 1, I would be number 2 or number 3. So we're those students that used to show off, right? And yeah, that was regardless of everything else that was going on in my life. So I grew up in a very poor family. And I won't even start to tell you all the things that I had to do. I know what it meant to work in people's fields, to watch somebody's place and say, can you give me exercise books at the 10 of these, and all of that. But my fighting space was in the classroom. I would say to somebody, I can be at your place working over the weekend. When we come in the classroom, you won't beat me. And now, Dr. Usha, I know that it was because we were not learning. No, rookie. We're not learning at the right level. Everybody was learning at my level, so I could cope. But at that age, you don't know. So I just want to say, when I finished my primary school, I had the best possible results nationally. This is in spite of the fact that I was at a school that was back of beyond. I was at a school where we did not even have enough textbooks. We were 4 of us with one teacher who was struggling to make it work, but all night you would be writing on the chalkboard so that in the morning you would help us understand that. But I had the best possible results nationally, and that was the first time my primary school had those results. And when I went to collect my results, I cried. That was turning point number 1. Because I might have been 12, 13, but I knew this was my last year in school. Because there was no way my parents could afford secondary school. Let's just talk about textbooks. Exercise books, writing exercise books. I needed 4 writing exercise books at primary school. At secondary, they needed 30. I didn't even have enough at primary. Now they needed 30. So at that point, that's when I was selected for comfort support. There is a whole photo there. Look at me. Do you see that? That's when I was selected for comfort support. This smart girl you see here, for the first time, I had the school uniform bought for me by the organization. I even had shoes. And by the way, that was already size 8 shoes because my feet had grown so big already. But I'm just saying that was my turning point number 1, the chance to stay in school. I'll tell you my turning point number 2. Of course, I stayed in school, right? Comfort was paying the school fees, they were providing the uniforms, the books, all of that. But it was when I completed my high school. And just to put this in context, where I come from, less than 5% of girls complete high school. Did you hear that? What percentage did I say? 5. Which means how many do not complete? 95% do not complete. So once again, I was that girl at primary school having a name called. But the problem there was that we did not know what you do after that. We did not know, how do you apply for university? There were no universities locally. How do you apply for a job? By the time you get a job advertisement in the village, in the newspaper, that job post will be filled already. We just did not know what was next. But remember, in my community, I was part of the 5% survivors. We've done it. And what was supposed to be a celebration was overwhelming. So my turning point was, Comfort once again invited 400 of us to come and celebrate that we had completed. So, do you see me? There is a winning prize if you can identify me. Do you see me? Martha and Lucy, no. You'll be cheating. Emily, not you. Do you see me? No, I'm the one right at the top, you see, with that line. And you can see I'm still wearing my uniform because that was the most decent clothes that I had. So when we met the 400 of us on this day, I realized I was not alone. I was not the only one who was struggling with what's next. Yesterday when Peter was talking, he talked about transition from secondary school into dignified and meaningful work. You can have the best results possible, but if you don't know what's next to do with that, you are equally stranded. So it was like getting to the top of the summit and realizing there was another mountain again. So my turning point number 2 was to realize I was not alone. There were 400 other young women at that time who had been supported through School by Comfort. We're trying to figure it out. On that day, we started the Comfort Association. And the Comfort Association, as I speak to you right now, is over 315,000 young women. By the end of this year, it will be 350,000 young women. On that day, we made a decision to say, we are going to support each other to figure out what exactly this transition means. But most importantly, we said, we have 5%. How do we increase this 5% to better? It's not enough to just be the gladiator, the person everybody calls. How do we bring others along? What did we learn on our secondary school journey? So we said we will go back to our secondary schools and support other children to go to school. Which brings me to turning point number 3. You remember the video you saw there about young women who were going back to schools and teaching. I want you to remember it was started by these young women who were just, can I go back to my secondary school and tell somebody that, you know, you can make friends even if you're coming from a poor family. If you don't understand maths, you can ask somebody to teach you. You might be overwhelmed today, but the sun will rise again tomorrow and you'll be fine. And yes, you might have lost your parent today, but so has this one. Can you sit down and talk about it? It's okay to talk about it. So that whole issue around support for children. And at that time, we developed a curriculum that was looking into what is it that we wanted to learn when we were in school. Because I learned about the French Revolution, about Napoleon Bonaparte, but we were starving at home. I wanted to learn about how do I harvest more food so that we would not starve. No, we were not really learning that. We're learning all these big things, equations, algebra, and all of that. I'm not saying they were bad, but it was not relating to the crisis that we had at that time. So as learner guys, we said, how do we link what I'm learning to today so that I can stay in school today? Because I will say that for poor people like me, it's survival, right? So I just want to be able to say the Learner Guide program that we started at that time is now nationwide programs in the countries that we work. It's in over 7,500 schools. And every year, there are over 2 million children who go through the guide program designed by people who came from turning points like mine. So what am I just saying? Any system change in education, any transformation, I want you to remember that children experience it as individuals. It's an individual impact. We might have 75% who are doing well, but if I'm not, I experience it personally. So turn your turning points and make it a whole movement, not a monument. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.